Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. It's a conversation in which AARP staff and volunteers talk to Connecticut decision makers about policies and programs that are of interest to older residents. My name is John Erlingheuser, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach at AARP in Connecticut. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by one of our great AARP Connecticut volunteers, Meari Avery. Thanks for being with us today, Meari. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do with our volunteers at AARP and a little bit maybe about your background and anything you think would be helpful for folks out there to know about you.
Okay, well, thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. My name is Meari Avery, and I'm from West Haven, and I've been an AARP volunteer since about 2018. I've worked in both advocacy, where we talk to the state legislatures or we look at bills that are of interest to people over 50, and also I do some education. So I'm on the caregiving task force and disrupt aging. My background is I'm a nurse and I still teach nursing students. So that's about it.
That's awesome. We have so many different volunteers that are with so many different backgrounds. It's great. You know, we have every kind of volunteer, and certainly your experience with nursing has been a big help to us, particularly in both the caregiving field and in the advocacy field when we're doing work on all of our issues down there. And it's great to have you and as a representative of all the volunteers across the state for AARP. Now,
Thanks.
it's also, you're welcome. Now, it's also my pleasure to welcome our special guest today. It's State Senator James Maroney of the 14th District. Senator Maroney, thanks for being with us this morning. And, before we get into the meat of what you do at the legislature, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe outside of the legislature, anything you want our viewers to know about yourself, maybe even tell us a little bit about the towns that you represent in the legislature in the 14th Senate District.
Great, John. Thank you very much. I represent the 14th district, so I'm fortunate enough to be Mary's state senator. So I represent Milford, Orange, West Haven, and a tiny piece of Woodbridge. And I was elected in 2018, and I have been very fortunate to be able to go back since then and work on a number of issues. But, prior to going into the legislature, I'd started an SAT prep, an educational consulting business. So I worked with high school students, helping them to get ready for college and try to make their college dreams a reality. Now I work also outside of the legislature for a law firm where you mentioned being a caregiver, where we're actually running a caregiver symposium. In November, I do community outreach. I'm not a lawyer, but I help set up their seminars and trainings. And also, recently, I started a brewery with some friends. So, yeah. And then I have a son who is a sophomore in college, and he's goes to school in Providence, Rhode Island. So it's close enough that I'm able to go up there for dinner sometimes, but not so close that he has to worry about me showing up unannounced. So
there you go. Well, that's great. And we appreciate that. And I know that people in the 14th District are lucky to have you with all of that experience you have in your background. And I know it serves them well in the state Senate. So with that, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Meari. And Meari, why don't you ask Senator Maroney our first question?
Yes. Hi, Senator. So, yes, I really appreciate all your representation. And I know that this is new to me. I just found out you're the co-chair of the General Law Committee, and I don't really know that much about that committee. Could you tell us a little bit about that committee, what its purview is, and what your role as co-chair in the committee is?
yeah, thank you very much. General Law Committee is actually a very interesting committee, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're not a lawyer. Why do you chair the General Law Committee?" But the laws, like when you think of like crimes and penalties, that's the Judiciary Committee usually. And actually, Senator Winfield, who co-chairs that, is the first person who wasn't a lawyer to co-chair the Judiciary Committee. But General Law Committee is consumer protection. And so our main thing is working with the Department of Consumer Protection. And so we are like that drawer in your kitchen sink that you put everything where you don't know where it goes. That's my committee in the legislature. And so we have a wide array of topics that we cover. Regulates alcohol, medical marijuana, recreational. We now regulate lottery and sports gambling, occupational licensure. So not for nurses, but for other licenses. If you're a window glazer or a lot of the trades they register, a CPA, accountants, realtors, all of those occupational licenses are regulated by Department of Consumer Protection. We actually now cover the tech issues. So a lot of what I've worked on is data privacy and AI. That falls in because that's enforced by the Attorney General's Data Privacy Unit, and the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Units overlap with us. So we pass a number of consumer protections, and that's really what it is. Anything that would impact a consumer or where you would reach out to the Department of Consumer Protection to assist you, that comes before our committee. And so it's a very interesting. It's, like I say, it's great for someone with ADD like me. You get to dive in and learn a lot of things about a number of different topics.
That's huge. So would things like if there was a complaint against an electrician come to you or not?
So it wouldn't necessarily come to me, but it would go to the Department of Consumer Protection.
Oh, okay.
But we oversee them. So if there were issues where you'd say the complaint process was too hard to find on the website, or there were other, like we should have longer to do something, right? Like it's because that's one of the things is on, if you're salesman, right? A door-to-door salesman, and like you're to consider a contract, even if it's not door to door with a contractor. If you say, well, it should be more than 2 days, right? That you have, it should, or more than, I can't remember if it's a full week now. But anyways, that we would have to change by law. But if it was an actual complaint, reach out to me, but I would put you in touch with the Department of Consumer Protection, who actually enforces the law. So the legislature, we make them, and then the department oversees and enforces. And they come to us every year with their recommendations for changes in bills. Oh, another area that we oversee that I forgot was pharmacies. And so, based on constituent input, we put in a process for unannounced pharmacy closures. So ago, because a lot of people were complaining they were getting there and they didn't know where to go. And because there's a shortage of pharmacy, you'd have a pharmacist on staff to be open, shortage of pharmacists, and the pharmacy needs a pharmacist on staff to be open. Sometimes if the pharmacist was sick, they would have to close unannounced. And so we had to put in a process to, put the sign on the outside wall so you don't have to walk all the way. And pharmacies usually the back of the store, notify people of other area pharmacies where you may be able to get your prescriptions, because sometimes you need that right away. You can't come back in the next day. So, but it's any really consumer issue, but for the most part, we regulate within our committee.
So that actually is a good segue into what I'd like to ask you, which, I quite honestly, Senator, since you've been the chair of the General Law Committee, and you have a good co-chair in Roland Lamar this year, and some good cooperative ranking members of the opposing party as well. We've been in Connecticut a leader on consumer protections issues, and having been a leader, AARP has gotten more and more involved in the work of your committee because it's so important to consumers. And you mentioned the data privacy legislation that you passed in Connecticut that was landmark and groundbreaking. In fact, AARP was the first data privacy bill in the country that we endorsed because of the strength of it and your work. And we've come before your committee a lot, and in particular this year on multiple bills. And one of the important bills that we did come before your committee this year had to do with, as you said, consumer protection. And that was Senate Bill 3, which was a very, very, very significant piece of legislation. I know AARP worked on this for a couple of years along with you and your Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff. So why is this legislation so important to consumers?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your advocacy. And really all credit to that is to Senator Duff, who had been pushing that bill for a few years, but a number of the topics within that bill for even longer. And so one of the big pieces of the bill was right to repair, right? Giving you the right to repair your own electronics. I think a lot of times, things are tied down. You can't get the pieces or the instructions. So this makes it so that you have the right to repair your own products. And when necessarily nullify the warranty on a product. And so that was a big thing. There was a piece in there on connected devices. Sometimes it could be refrigerators or other devices that are connected to the internet. What we're saying is that if the connected devices are not allowed to listen to you and sell you advertising based on what they're hearing. I think everyone does that, where you say something and then all of a sudden the next day you're seeing ads for it and you're like, how did that happen? And so sometimes it's just the algorithm has predicted it. It isn't related to you saying something, but there are some places that were collecting that information and selling it, right? So you can't do that in Connecticut anymore. And there were a lot of there was a very strong consumer protection bill that Senator Duff and Ken Sesente, his chief of staff, worked on. And I was fortunate enough to be able to bring it out and defend that in the Senate and through the committee process.
And I'll just add, there were strong protections for auto renew contract provisions so that people have additional ways to cancel those contracts. And we thought that was just so important. And full disclosure of fees. People go in.
Yeah, the all-in pricing was important.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So those.
There's a price gouging, giving the AG
Yes.
to go up the chain on the price gouging. Yeah, it was a very strong pro-consumer bill.
And I will just say AARP not too long ago was with the governor and Senator Duff and Norwalk when they did a bill signing, and Senator Duff gave you a large share of the credit for this. So don't be modest about the work that you did on the committee. I know it was a priority bill for your caucus, and it was certainly a priority bill for AARP. And again, I mean, that's just one of the many, both this session and over the last couple of sessions, strong consumer protection bills that you helped spearhead out of your committee. So we really do appreciate that, and thank you. And maybe to talk about another one, I'll leave it back to Meari.
Another bill that the General Law Committee has passed is the Net Equity Program about affordable internet service to Connecticut residents. I know it was originally part of one bill, but then it got folded into another bill. So could you please tell people what the Net Equity Program is and why it needed to be created?
Yeah, and again, this is really Senator Duff. It's something he's been pushing for years, and we see how connected our lives are now and how much we use the internet and how critical that is going to be to work skills going forward, even to accessing a lot of government services now. You have to go online. And so this program just requires that all of the major internet providers have a low-cost option for families, and it indexes it to inflation, but it starts at no more than $40 a month. There are some, Comcast has a great program, Optimum there too in my area, that already had programs, but we just wanted to make sure that they stay and that families can access these programs. And I think it's also for workforce skills going forward. One of the things I work on a lot is AI legislation. And last year, Microsoft, LinkedIn, in their hiring survey, 2/3 of companies said they wouldn't hire someone without generative AI skills. 72% of companies said that they would hire someone with less experience in generative AI skills over someone with more experience who did not have generative AI skills. And so in order to get those skills, right, you need to be online. And we also know from the Connecticut, they did a survey of 4,000 families when they're trying to roll out our digital equity program. And it's over 1/4 of families are not connected to high-speed internet. And so if one of those barriers is cost, we're trying to remove that as a barrier, because it is basically, it's essential to participate, to make an appointment to go to the DMV now, right? Department of Motor Vehicles. You have to make your appointment online. All of to access a lot of critical government services, you need to go online. And so we need to give people the ability to get online. So again, kudos to Senator Duff. This is something he had been pushing for years, and we were finally able to get it across the finish line.
And Senator, I mean, it's also just so critical for telehealth when you talk
Right.
about our folks and
Mm-hmm.
not only just telehealth, but social isolation for so many seniors who just without the ability to get online, just don't have the ability to stay connected with family and friends who may not be living close to them. So it's critical to us. And part of we're so glad we were able to get it done. It will be into effect in 2026. And as you said, many companies do have low cost options that you can pursue if you're eligible. But again, it was essential that we get this bill passed because of the fact that the Congress, you know, let the money run out for the Affordable
Right.
Connectivity Program at the federal level, which was such a groundbreaking thing. And the
Yeah.
industry, yeah, well, so many of the folks in the industry will say, well, we're connected in Connecticut, and then they'll say that because the high-speed internet lines may be going past somebody's home, but again, it doesn't address the point you pointed out, which is affordability many
Mm-hmm.
times is the a barrier, not just the ability to get the service to the home.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we're grateful for that. So
Before
now,
you move on,
oh, go ahead.
excuse me, John, can I ask the senator one more question? You talked a little bit about generative AI. Could you identify or define what you mean by that? Because again, my generation is digital immigrants. We didn't grow up with this. So what do you mean by generative AI?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. I think people toss around the term AI now, and you don't know
Mm.
necessarily what it means because it could be machine learning, could be generative AI, it could be algorithmic decision making. There are a lot
Mm-hmm.
of different ways and different things. Facial recognition is an AI, right? Google Maps is an AI, artificial intelligence. Generative AI is basically a program that generates something new. Right. And
Hmm.
so let's say ChatGPT is probably the example that everyone knows. It's
Mm-hmm.
generating text or images in response to a query. And
Oh,
so when you talk about the generative AI, you're usually talking about Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, some of those. They're also called the large language models, LLMs, that they
Hmm.
train large amounts of data. But yeah, the generative AI is typically like a chat GPT or any program that generates something. So it could be like Dolly or Midjourney that generate images, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
in text, generate a picture of this or do that or whatever, but something that generates something new based on a text prompt.
great. That's
Thank you.
important. I
Yeah.
have a feeling we're going to be having to continue to learn about this as we go along more and more. So, Senator, we've done so much work with you over the years in the General Law Committee, but you serve as the Vice Chair of the Energy and Technology Committee. You've also served at one point, I think you were Chair of the Aging Committee. You're still on the committee, two committees in addition to your primary committee that we come before very often. And, a lot of legislation came out of those committees both this year and over the last couple of years. So why don't you tell us about some of the things you think maybe from either the Energy Committee or the Aging Committee that you think are going to have a positive impact on your constituents and our members across the state?
Yeah, I'd say another major bill was, Senator Needleman, the chair of the Energy Committee, did a fantastic job along with his co-chair, Representative Steinberg, Jonathan, in negotiating Senate Bill 4, which was on looking at energy prices and energy is very complicated and the protections. And this was a start, right? It wasn't a solution. It was a start to help us lower energy costs and took some of the pieces out of the what's called the public benefit. And the public benefit charge is really like 12 to 15 small charges that were all lumped
Mm-hmm.
together. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really more appropriately would be called a public policy charge because some of the largest pieces of that are for the transmission on the grid, right?
Right.
Fees from the federal government. But it did take out some of the programs that were in there. For instance, it was paying for electric chargers, and we took that out, and that's bonded now. And it took out some of the paying off some past, arrearages, people who hadn't been able to pay their bills, which was a really small percentage of that. Everyone
Yep.
thinks the whole thing is paying off someone else's bill. Unfortunately, it was only a small percentage, and that's been taken out. But we're going to see, based on some of those changes, 12 to 20 something dollars a month, people will be saving starting starting this month on their electricity bills. And so that was very important. It wasn't, um, wasn't in either of those committees, but another one of probably which will be the most significant bill, I think, long term that we passed this year was the governor and creating and other advocates looking at creating the early childhood trust funds so that starting in a few years, if you make under $100,000 a year family, you won't pay for your child care and it'll be capped at 7% of income. And creating that fund, I mean, childcare is one of those big barriers, especially to a lot of women re-entering the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a lunch with gentleman who runs one of the workforce boards. And actually, the number one barrier to employment, which I didn't realize in the state, is transportation. Childcare is number two. And
Yeah.
so this, over the long run, not to mention that in the first 3 years of life, that is the most critical formative time of your brain. And so it's helping people get back into the workforce now, but you're changing the trajectory of people's lives, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what we're able to do. And so long term, that will end up being the most significant piece of legislation passed. And again, credit to all the advocates, the governor, those who pushed that through. But those are two key because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people worry about who's going to watch for their grandchildren. If it's not their own children, their children's children, so that their children
Mm-hmm.
aren't as stressed and can get back to work. And
Well,
um,
Senator, I want to mention, just say one thing about, because you did a pretty good job of talking about the public benefits charge, and people politicize that, and that was something that was always in people's electric bills, except it finally was broken out into a separate indicating thing. And when everybody's bills went up in 2024, it was because we were in one of the worst heat waves of in many years, and there was a lot else happening out there, that caused people to have high usage, which caused that charge to go up because it goes up with the amount of usage.
right.
Um, but shame on those that politicize that and blame poor people that didn't pay their bills, especially when the majority of those unpaid bills weren't necessarily even residential
No,
customers. They were small business owners who don't go into the commercial industrial charge. They pay the residential charge, and they went belly up because of COVID and those hard
Mm-hmm.
times then, and didn't pay their bills. And so, a lot of that, people that always gets lost. People always say, oh, it's the person who just didn't pay their bill during COVID, when a lot of it was small business owners who took a very hard hit during those times. So I appreciate the fact that you guys addressed that in a fair way. And that was what our objective was when it came to utility legislation. We worked very closely with the co-chairs and to make sure that, changes were made where they could be made, but not at the expense of things that were important to help people, like helping people pay for the bills when they can't. So I want to thank you for that. Let me just, you talked about the early childhood development legislation. We've got time for maybe one or two more questions. So is there anything else or any other priorities that you have either now or moving forward that you want to talk about quickly?
Yeah, quickly, one of the things we were able to pass was we got into the budget to create the Connecticut Online AI Academy. And so we're giving free generative AI training. So I would encourage anyone who's listening to really take the course. It's free and it'll help you learn how to use generative AI. And we know that that's critical skill for the workforce, but it's also some of the people going through the program. David Ferrer of Charter Oak created it. He still moderates a lot of the classes. He said, in one of the cohorts, there was a gentleman in there, he said he was a house husband, and he was using ChatGPT to be efficient around the house. And they created a custom GPT, a chore GPT, they called it, to help figure out the best way of doing the chores. So there are a lot of different uses you may not even have thought of for this and ways that it can help us to be more efficient, something not to be afraid of, but to understand. right? And so from that, we're expanding. We're going to do the Teen AI Academy to work with teenagers through Boys and Girls Clubs, and also to go 2 generation. When the parents fill out the permission slip for their kids, we're going to ask them if they want to enroll so we can get them enrolled in the Online AI Academy, as well as courses to help businesses learn how to use it to become more efficient and compete. So I think that was important that we're doing that we're helping get our residents ready. World Economic Forum says that by 2030, 59% of our workforce is going to need to be reskilled or upskilled. So we're trying to get started on that. We've only had, I think it's less than 2,000 have gone through, but that's exciting because our goal in the first year was to have 1,000 people go through, and we're less than halfway through the first year, only a couple months in, and we have had almost 2,000 people already go through the program. But it still means we have 998,000 more Connecticut residents to reskill and upskill. But that's something, again, I want to make sure we're thinking about that. There's some people say it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's someone who knows how to use AI that's going to take your job. But my friend Delegate Maldonado from Virginia likes to point out that that's not necessarily true. There are a lot of jobs that are going to disappear, and those jobs are disproportionately done by women and often women of color. And so, Jobs for the Future did a presentation. 1 in 3 women are in jobs that are at risk of being automated by AI, whereas less than 1 in 4 men are in jobs that are at risk of being automated by AI. Some of the top jobs at risk of being automated by AI: customer service representative and administrative assistant, jobs that are done often by women, but also jobs where talented people, and usually women, get in and work their way up. Those are gateway jobs, and half of gateway jobs are
Mhm.
at risk of being automated by AI. So we need to make sure we're giving people the skills they need to succeed in the modern economy and to use it responsibly. So, we'll be continuing to work on AI legislation, both promoting the use, promoting workforce development, but also putting in some guardrails so people can feel safe when using it. Another thing we did last year that maybe I think actually is important for really anyone, but especially seniors if you're looking for rentals. 50 to 75% of large landlords are now using AI for screening tenants. And there are examples of people who were denied housing in either disability housing, or a gentleman in Florida in this one, Chris Peterson, I believe was his name, who's denied into a senior living facility in Florida because he was deemed a high risk renter because 20 years ago he had a littering violation. So first, nothing says that littering makes you a bad tenant especially if you did it 20 years ago. Second, it wasn't him. It was another man with the same name in Texas, not even in California where this man lived. And so what we did this year is if they're using tenant screening software like that, they have to notify you, give you the right to opt out of using that tenant screening software. But afterwards, you get an explanation of if you were denied, on why you were denied. And if it's based on wrong data, you'll have the ability to correct that data. So even if maybe they already gave away the apartment, so you can't get it there, at least you won't continue to keep being
Right.
rejected for apartments. So I think that was another important thing that we did this last year.
Well, we appreciate that, Senator. Mary has one more quick question that our volunteers always like to ask, and I know because it's important to the work that they do. And so, Mary, why don't you wrap us up, and then I'll close us out.
And before I do that, how do people sign up for Connecticut Online Academy? Do you have a website?
Charteroak.edu.
Charteroak.edu. My last question to you is, we frequently testify or come to the General Assembly. We've come in the past, we're active. But how can the public stay informed about what's going on with the legislature, and what are some of the ways they can participate?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think a lot of times people feel their voice doesn't matter, which is unfortunate
Mm-hmm.
because it does matter. It's just we haven't done a great job. I mean the legislature and people in
Mm-hmm.
government, of educating citizens on how to effectively use their voice. So one, I would say start at the CGA website, cga.ct.gov. Connecticut General Assembly is what CGA stands for. All of the information on bills, the dates of public hearings are there. You don't have to come up to Hartford to testify anymore. You can sign up and testify by Zoom. Again, another reason why that net equity program is so important. But legislators generally, I do coffee and conversations. I have a weekly newsletter. Make sure you're emailing your legislator to get on their email news list, because that's the way you're going to find out if they're doing events in the district. And it's almost in some ways, it's like, I told you earlier that I used to work in college advising students on college admissions. One of the information sessions I went to, the admissions officer, his piece of advice was, find out who's going to be reading your application and make sure that person knows who you are, right? So you go meet them face to face so they can put a face to the name. I would say a lot of that's similar for the legislator. Go to the coffee and conversations. Go to, if they do online, sometimes we'll do online office hours or do an evening presentation. So find out where they're going to be and make sure that your legislator can put a face to your name. In addition to sending emails are important. We track on major issues how many of our constituents are for or against something. If you want to email me, my email is james.maroney, Maroney, at cga.ct.gov. That's important, but it's just as important. It means a little more if you say, oh, I talked to them. I know her, I know him. So create that connection would be my best advice. And then follow things on the CGA website. And if you can, sign up to testify. If you can't testify, send an email testimony. You can have your voice heard and be put on the record that way.
Okay.
That was great. So very thorough on so many different options people have to stay involved in the work of the General Assembly and their government in general. So I appreciate that. And I want to thank Meari Avery, one of our great AARP volunteers, both for co-hosting with me today and for all the work that you do, Meari, with AARP. We really, truly appreciate it. And I want to thank our very special guest, State Senator James Maroney, who we've worked with over the years and so many different issues in so many different committees, both as a state senator and back when you were a state representative.
Yes.
So we do appreciate all that you do, and thank you for being here as well.
Thank you very much for having me.
It was great. And then thanks to all of you for tuning into another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. Join us again for future episodes and catch back episodes on demand right here on our Facebook page or on our YouTube page. You can scan this QR code to become an e-advocate and help us advance policies important to those 50 plus in Connecticut. And thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your morning.